A jury in New York found former President Trump liable for sex abuse and defamation. This was in a civil case brought by a former columnist, E. Jean Carroll, who accused him of raping her in a dressing room in Bergdorf Goodman in 1996. Trump now has to pay her $5 million in damages, but is maintaining his innocence. On social media, Trump said, quote, "I have no idea who this woman who made a false and totally fabricated accusation is. Hopefully justice will be served on appeal." Meantime, here's what E. Jean Carroll said about her big win on GMA.
I feel fantastic. Yesterday was probably the happiest day of my life. Despite prosecutors and special counsels and investigators piling all these legal snarls up to Trump, it was this 5'3", wily female attorney and this elderly 79-year-old advice columnist who are finally holding Donald Trump liable.
So for more on this, we have criminal trial attorney and legal analyst for NewsNation, Sara Azari, joining us. Sara, thank you for being here. Always love hearing your input. Welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Good to be with you guys.
So, Sara, what do you think of the verdict and what does it mean?
So, I expected this verdict. I expected him to be liable on both the defamation count and the sexual assault or sexual abuse count, although it was a rape count. We'll get to that later. I think what I was most surprised by was that the verdict, the damages, I expected a bigger monetary amount. The case that Carroll put on was very compelling. And it was also very defensible had Trump not made a flat out denial. So Trump did what Trump does, which is, usually very impulsive. He goes out and speaks on multiple platforms. And he just said, "I don't know this woman," right? Which was a complete lie. And it also boxed in his lawyers in their ability to be able to say, no, he does know her. Maybe they did hook up at Bergdorf, and this is not this, unusual thing, but it was consensual. And so they couldn't do that because he basically denied any knowledge of who she was. So that was the bigger problem. And I also think his lawyers did an inadequate job in their defense. They didn't put any defense on. Mm-hmm. Well, she had the compelling witnesses. And they also, they didn't put him on, right, which he didn't have to take the stand. But in a civil case, there's an inference of liability if the defendant does not testify. So there was that problem. And frankly, I think, you guys probably remember the Cosby case. There was also a civil lawsuit in that case. And the defense had the woman forensically, independently, psychologically examined. They didn't even bother to do that. So they really did nothing. Instead, they said, liar, liar, pants on fire, which doesn't really persuade a jury.
No, he's not great to work for as a lawyer, I imagine. Now, I'm curious very much so, why do you think the jury found Trump liable for sex abuse, but not rape, in your opinion?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, November of 2022, the New York State Legislature passed an Adult Survivors Act law. Essentially, it's a look-back window that lifts the bar that a statute of limitations typically places on someone to bring a tort for sexual assault. They say that if there is a crime under the New York Penal Code for the type of behavior or conduct, then you're not barred from bringing that claim. So initially, Carroll had filed for just defamation, and then she went back and added the rape count. And so in the special verdict forms, the jury had a choice of 3 different types of sexual misconduct. One was rape, one was sexual abuse, and one was, I think, forcible touching. And I think that the testimony to the jury was not really persuasive that she was genitally raped, but it was more of a digital type of touching without going into the graphic details of the testimony. And so the jury said, okay, it was sexual abuse, not rape. But it's really a distinction with no difference because at the end of the day, it's about that tort that he was liable.
Right.
Yeah, so Sara, to the point you just made, the jury awarded Carroll $5 million in damages, but actually gave her more money for defamation than they did for the sex abuse. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that sends a loud and clear message that at least this jury values reputational damage far more than bodily harm. Ugh. And I think they just were probably disgusted by Donald Trump, not just calling it a hoax like he does every investigation, but really calling her a con job and like, she's a liar. I mean, he really went too far with that. Because if he just said hoax, I mean, that would be an opinion, much like he said before. And I think it would really be dangerous to say, oh, anybody that is accused of a wrongdoing now can't deny the wrongdoing because they're going to get sued for defamation. I mean, that's also a dangerous type of precedent. But he really went too far with it, and he repeatedly called her a liar.
Do you think, Sarah, two-part question. Number one, do you think the $5 million is an adequate amount? And then also, we know that he and his lawyer have now vowed to appeal. So on what ground do you expect them to appeal, and will they be successful?
Yeah, so on the amount, I thought, like I said, I thought it was symbolic, considering this is a defamation suit against at least a quote unquote billionaire and, and a former president. I mean, I would think there would be at least double digits, right? That's what
Right.
So I think, and given that she didn't really ask for a specific dollar value or prove a particular dollar value, they went with sort of something symbolic. On the appellate issue, yeah, sure, he can appeal a ham sandwich. He can appeal whatever he wants. But at the end of the day, it's not because he doesn't like the verdict or thinks the judge has some agenda against him. He has to come up with some sort of evidentiary or, some sort of a judicial error. And he has to show that it's not harmless error, that it would have resulted in a different verdict had it not happened. So one of the problems I had is the admission of the Access Hollywood tape.
Yeah.
Right.
That tape to me was evidence that he's a pig and a misogynist. It was not evidence that he's a rapist. And so it was brought in exactly for a reason that the evidence code precludes, which is character evidence, propensity evidence. We're not supposed to be able to bring that type of evidence. And so again, I don't think it was an adequate defense. And I think probably the judge was very liberal in this case.
Interesting. Sarah, thank you so much for being here and breaking this all down for us. Great to see you.